everyone, welcome back to Storybaggers. Today we will be reading chapter 16. On with the story. The class had chosen the edge of the meadow that ran alongside one side of Piecross Lane, partly because it was a natural open area for a performance, with the scrub and trees on either side forming a useful backdrop, but mostly because it was far enough from the old oak tree to escape Dr. Kimori's all-seeing eye. Do you have to sing, Blossom? I mean, you can whistle while you work, can't you? Does it have to be show tunes? The indignant diva fluffed out her skirts. I'm trying to attract attention. That's the point of this, isn't it? Honestly, Pippin, sometimes I wonder if you're taking this seriously. And she flounced off to the edge of the clearing where she could practice trilling in peace. Pippin grunted, tugging his wig with attached fake beard and moustache a little lower down over his head to ensure that his ears were fully covered by the fluffy grey wool. Bobble had positioned the 5 other dwarves hanging up in a line from a big sycamore branch. This was to be the dwarves' bed branch, where Snow White would discover them sleeping after fluttering through the forest trying to escape from the woodcutter. Vesper, you're supposed to be asleep. You wouldn't be eating in your sleep now, would you? Vesper muttered something and swallowed, then closed his eyes. This was easy. He could do this any night of the week. Rocking to and fro in the mild night air, it was all very relaxing, as long as Blossom would put a sock in it. Pippin, do you think you could hang yourself up there next to Vesper? Maybe you could try a bit of snoring? You are sleepy after all. Achoo! Vesper turned an indignant head.
Hey, Pippin, that's supposed to be me, not you.
Sorry, Vesper, it's the bark dust. Didn't mean to. Budge up a bit, will you? After a bit of shuffling, muttering, and a final sneeze, the dwarves were, finally, rocking gently together like one hairy laundry line. Bobble took one last look around the meadow, nothing to see so far, and hooked himself up next to Pippin, his mum's reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Hanging deep within the scrub on the other side of Piecross Lane, Boo watched all of the class shenanigans with interest. It was so much more interesting than being stuck up at the heights. What in Haven were that little Fruit Loop and his friends up to now? Though he never would have admitted it, ever since he had met them, Boo had been a bit envious of Bobble and Vesper's friendship. Now it seemed that Bobble had a whole class of friends. Boo couldn't help but watch the chummy bickering that went on between them. It didn't sound like proper arguing. It was intriguing. Vampire bats were solitary creatures on the whole, hunting alone and highly competitive. If you got into an argument with a vampire bat, there tended to be consequences. There were no schools for vampires, just hard life lessons that you picked up as you got older, or didn't, depending on whether or not you wanted to survive. In fact, the vampires' dislike of happy endings could be traced back, in part at least, to the way that they were treated as they were growing up. Adult vampires saw it as their duty to criticise younger bats, pointing out their faults, teasing them for any small mistakes, constantly chipping away at the natural confidence and joy of youth until it was suffocated in spiteful slights and negativity. The choking darkness in the Horism Heights was maintained by vampires in positions of power, setting this example of petty meanness and bullying, the biggest bully of them all being old Batwings himself. No young vampire bat had ever dared to question the way the vampires conducted themselves, let alone thought about behaving differently. And yet, hanging upside down in the scrub, Boo felt a strange yearning to be around this odd little group, to understand how it was that they could tease each other but not seem to take any of it too seriously. For the first time in his life, Boo knew what it was to be lonely. He watched silently as the bat in the skirts, Blossom was it, flew into the clearing in a big theatrical flap. He tilted his sharp little chin to get a better view. What was she doing? Oh me, oh my poor heart! Will I ever outfly that wicked huntsman? I cannot go any further. I have to rest, and here I am, a small bat, all alone in the forest. Boo put his head on one side, puzzled. She clearly was not in a forest, but flapping about at the edge of a field, and she wasn't alone. All alone, in a big, dark forest. Boo conceded that she did look genuinely nervous as she looked around to confirm that she was alone. Did she believe what she was saying? Could this be real? Was this a story? Had Blossom been caught up in a story spark? The bigger vampire bat that Boo had just spotted crawling underneath the fence rail clearly thought so. Yes, all alone, and so very far from home. Perhaps a song would help to raise my weary spirits. At this, Boo's attention was drawn sharply back to the row of hairy bats hanging on the sycamore branch, which had shaken as in a strong breeze as she said this. Blossom flounced about before finally hooking herself up onto a delicate twig to sing. Now, Blossom may have been a slender bat, but she had failed to take into account the additional weight of her voluminous skirts. Tra-la-la-la! The twig slowly started to bend back on itself, almost to the ground. There was a loud twang, and Snow White was catapulted mid-trill high into the air. The line of dwarves sniggered. One of them snorted loudly, and then tried to turn it into a snore. No, Boo thought. This wasn't a story. Well, not a real one anyway. This was something else. But what? The bigger vampire had been joined by another. They were knuckling their way around different sides of the clearing, each wary of the other. Their sharp eyes and teeth were gleaming as they crawled and sniffed, each trying to beat the other to locating the story spark. Boo was pretty sure that the Fruit Fuzzies had not spotted their audience. Yet. He wasn't sure what would happen if they did. They wouldn't be stupid enough to want to pick a fight with fully grown vampires, would they? They may look like they were slow movers, on their broken umbrella-spoke legs, but Boo knew that at any second they could break into a run. They were fast, dead fast, and they were armed to the teeth. Boo had been on the receiving end of a few bites and slashes himself, when he had accidentally flown into someone else's hunting patch, and he knew just how horrible the injuries inflicted by an aggressive vampire could be. Recovering her balance, Blossom smoothed down her hair and glided over to the sycamore branch, from where she directed some very unladylike glances in the direction of her classmates. Now, Dr. Kumori may have been an old bat, but he was a wise old bat, and the meek and obedient performance put on by the Double A's the previous evening had not fooled him one tiny bit. No. But he had business that would keep him in Haventown tonight, and so he had asked a friend of his to keep an eye on the class while he was away. Great Uncle Bendigo was watching the performance of Snow White with a mixture of amusement and frustration. There was no denying that Bobble and his friends were giving it their all and having fun, but the masked bat was frustrated because he knew that out there somewhere there was a story that was in trouble and he should be rescuing it, not stuck here watching a school play, or whatever it was supposed to be. It never occurred to Bendigo that the youngsters were setting a trap for the vampires, because no one in their right mind would do such a thing. Would they? Bendigo had spotted Boo the moment that he had arrived, and had concluded that the youngster didn't pose any real threat to the class. But, distracted by the class antics, it wasn't until they were directly underneath Blossom's sycamore branch that he spotted the two crawling vampires, great scruffy brutes with patches of fur torn out, bodies and faces scarred from a lifetime of fighting. These boys were quite another matter altogether. With a lurch, Bendigo realised that they were hunting, and it looked like what they were hunting was Blossom. Blossom had woken the dwarves, and there was much flapping and fluttering going on as they questioned Snow White, loudly, about her wicked stepmother and the huntsman.
That thocking! How could thee do such a thing?
Blimey, what an old battle-axe! Snow White, you must stay here and look after our branch for us. We'll protect you. Oh, boys, that's so sweet of you. Let's all live happily together here in the big forest. Your branch certainly needs a lot of cleaning up, and you can all help as you made the mess, and I'm not going to be your servant, whatever you might think, Sleepy. Snow White directed a fierce stare at the protesting dwarf. But while we work to make the time fly, let's all join in and sing a happy song. And she fluttered away from the branch, ready to fill her lungs. Now, many things happened at once. The vampire on the left twitched, still unsure about what it was watching, but ready to pounce when the story spark showed itself, which must surely be soon. The vampire on the left twitched, still unsure about what it was watching, but ready to pounce when the story spark showed itself, which must surely be soon. The vampire on the right saw the vampire on the left twitch, and assumed that it had spotted the story spark. Taking no chances, it launched itself into the air to grab the oblivious, warbling fruit bat and drag it down into the grass. As it leapt, the other vampire sprang to grab it. In that second, Blossom felt a rush of air as the ground below her dangling head erupted into a boiling mass of nightcrawlers. All she could see was slashing claws and snapping jaws as the massive bats tangled with each other to grab her first. It was like looking down into a smashed-up cutlery drawer, and so Blossom did what Blossom did so well. She created. Blossom screamed, loudly. Her scream could have broken glassware, it could have cleared sinuses. And Bendigo flew. He flew fast and he flew furious. No one was going to hurt a fruit bat on his watch. No one. He shot high into the air, then plummeted, angling his dive to hit the two fighting vampires with the full force of his rage. Smash! Slash! Tear! Rip! Blossom, Bobble and the others huddled together as the masked bat fought. Never in their entire lives had they seen anything so frightening. This was not the sort of heroics they had imagined in their games. This was horrible and real. There didn't seem to be any rules. Bats were getting hurt. Really hurt. Fur flew and wings tore as teeth ripped and claws slashed into soft body parts. The screeching was horrible. Bobble watched, frozen in shock, as Bendigo started flapping to try to get himself off the meadow floor where he was outnumbered. Bobble knew that the masked bat was trying to take the advantage away from the crawlers. If he stayed on the floor, he was dead. All he had was a standing start. Bobble could never have done it, but Bendigo was made of muscle and grit. Each single painful wing stroke was powerful enough to carry him up a little bit higher. It wasn't much, but it would do. The vampires needed to run before they could get airborne, and this was the advantage that Bendigo had been looking for. By the time the scrappy pair had got themselves off the ground, the masked bat was waiting, and he came in like a thunderbolt. Smack! Slash! Whack! Rip! The vampires didn't stand a chance. Reeling from the full force of the masked bat's fury, the vampires spun apart and fled in different directions. It was over. In tomorrow's Story Baggers, the double A's have to face the music, and Boo starts to think like a fruit bat. Till then, stay safe everyone, stay inside, and good night.